Imagine a nation that, at the dawn of the 20th century, shone like a beacon of prosperity in Latin America. A country that attracted millions of immigrants from all over the world, seduced by the promise of a better life, a land of opportunity where hard work was rewarded and the future seemed limitless. Buenos Aires, its capital, rivaled the great European metropolises, boasting elegant architecture, a vibrant cultural life, and a booming economy. Argentina was known as the Paris of South America, a symbol of wealth, modernity, and progress. Now, transport yourself to the present. Imagine that same country ravaged by recurrent economic crises, plunged into a cycle of galloping inflation, currency devaluation, foreign debt, and growing social inequality. The once prosperous nation struggles with widespread poverty, unemployment, and disbelief in a better future. What happened? How could a rising economic power decline so drastically? Argentina's history is a fascinating and tragic tale, a stark example of how economic mismanagement, political instability, corruption, and a lack of long-term vision can lead a country to ruin. It is a story of ambition, grandeur, and sadly, profound decline. In this video, we will explore in depth the trajectory of the Argentine economy, from its golden age to its downfall. We will investigate the factors that fueled its initial growth, the seeds of decline that were present from the beginning, and the crucial mistakes that culminated in the crises that marked the 20th century and continue to haunt the country to this day. Prepare for a detailed and revealing analysis that seeks not only to understand the past, but also to draw valuable lessons for the present and the future. This is not just Argentina's story. It is a warning to the world. At the beginning of the 20th century, Argentina experienced a period of unprecedented prosperity, known as the Argentine Belle Époque. Several factors converged to drive this spectacular growth. The vast expanse of fertile land in the Pampas region offered ideal conditions for agriculture. The production of wheat, beef, and wool grew exponentially, transforming Argentina into one of the world's main breadbaskets. The country became an important supplier to industrialized Europe, which demanded food and raw materials. The Argentine economy was heavily based on the export of these agricultural products. This model, although profitable in the short term, created an external dependence that would prove problematic in the future. European capital, mainly British, invested heavily in Argentine infrastructure. The construction of railways expanded the agricultural frontiers, connecting the productive interior to the ports of Buenos Aires and Rosario. The modernization of ports facilitated the flow of production to international markets. A wave of European immigrants, mainly Italians, Spaniards, and Germans, arrived in Argentina in search of better opportunities. This skilled workforce contributed to the development of agriculture, industry, and commerce, as well as enriching the country's culture. For a few decades, Argentina enjoyed relative political stability, which favored economic growth and attracted investment. The Constitution of 1853, inspired by the American model, established a liberal political system that, despite its limitations, provided a favorable environment for business. The capital, Buenos Aires, became a cosmopolitan center, with architecture inspired by Paris, theaters, cafes, and a vibrant cultural life. The city attracted intellectuals, artists, and business people, consolidating its position as one of the main urban centers in Latin America. The combination of these factors resulted in a per capita income comparable to that of developed European countries such as France, Germany, and Italy. Argentina stood out as an example of economic success in Latin America and the world. Despite the period of prosperity, some factors began to undermine the foundations of the Argentine economy. The heavy dependence on the export of agricultural products made Argentina extremely vulnerable to fluctuations in international prices. When commodity prices fell on global markets, the Argentine economy suffered a severe impact. The 1929 crisis, for example, had serious consequences for the country. The wealth generated by the agro-export model was concentrated in the hands of an agrarian elite, which controlled large rural properties, estancias. This concentration of income generated deep social inequality, with a large portion of the population excluded from the benefits of growth. The lack of a robust middle class limited domestic consumption and hindered the development of other sectors of the economy. From the end of the 19th century and the beginning of the 20th century, Argentina went through a period of increasing political instability. Conflicts between different political groups, including conservatives, radicals, and the military, resulted in coups d'état, authoritarian governments, and frequent regime changes. This instability hindered the implementation of long-term economic policies and created an environment of uncertainty that discouraged investment and hindered sustainable development. The Argentine economy remained overly dependent on the agricultural sector, without investing in other sectors, such as industry. This lack of diversification made the country even more vulnerable to external shocks and limited its long-term growth potential. Although there were some attempts at industrialization, they were late and dependent on imports, which made it difficult to develop a strong and competitive domestic industry. Although not on the scale of later crises, Argentina was already showing some signs of inflation, which were beginning to erode the population's purchasing power and generate economic instability. The combination of these factors began to compromise Argentina's economic growth, marking the beginning of a period of instability and uncertainty that would culminate in the economic crises that marked the 20th century. What had previously been a successful trajectory began to turn into a downward spiral. Argentina's economic decline was not an isolated event, but rather the result of a complex interaction of factors that reinforced each other, creating a vicious cycle. The main ones include: Argentina oscillated between different economic models, often implementing contradictory measures and lacking a long-term vision. Excessive protectionism, with high import tariffs, harmed the competitiveness of national industry and isolated the country from the global market. Exchange controls and state intervention in the economy created distortions and inefficiencies. The nationalization of companies, in many cases, resulted in mismanagement and losses. To finance its spending and development projects, Argentina resorted to external loans, accumulating a growing public debt. The inability to generate consistent trade surpluses and the devaluation of the currency made debt repayment increasingly difficult, generating recurring crises. Corruption became endemic in various sectors of public administration, diverting resources that should have been invested in essential areas such as education, health, infrastructure, and social development. The lack of transparency and accountability undermined public trust in institutions and drove away foreign investors, hampering economic growth. The Argentine economy remained overly dependent on exports of agricultural products, mainly meat and grains. This dependence made the country vulnerable to fluctuations in international commodity prices and to climate factors such as droughts and floods, which affected agricultural production. The lack of economic diversification limited the growth and development potential of other sectors, such as industry and technology. Inflation became a chronic problem in Argentina, eroding the population's purchasing power, generating economic uncertainty, and making long-term planning difficult. Expansionary monetary policies, public deficits, and currency devaluation contributed to the inflationary spiral. Hyperinflation in some historical periods caused serious damage to the economy and society. Political culture and the expectations of the population also played an important role in Argentina's economic trajectory. Populism, with its promises of quick solutions and immediate benefits, took root in Argentine political culture. Populist governments, seeking popular support, implemented welfare policies and wage increases without economic backing, generating fiscal imbalances and inflation. Political clientelism, with the exchange of favors for votes, perpetuated corrupt and inefficient practices. The search for immediate results and the lack of strategic planning hindered the country's sustainable development. The population often prioritized quick and palliative solutions over long-term structural reforms. This mentality made it difficult to implement consistent economic policies and adapt to changes in the global scenario. Corruption, political instability, and economic crises undermined the population's confidence in institutions and in the country's ability to overcome its problems. This distrust led to capital flight, with investors withdrawing their resources from Argentina in search of greater security and profitability in other countries. Capital flight has worsened the economic crisis and hampered the country's recovery. The implementation of structural reforms, which could have brought long-term benefits, has often faced strong resistance from the population and interest groups. The lack of political consensus and ideological polarization have made it difficult to approve unpopular measures that are necessary to stabilize the economy. Argentina's economic history has been marked by a cycle of expectations of growth and development, followed by crises and frustrations. This cycle has generated a sense of pessimism and disbelief in the country's ability to achieve a better future, which has contributed to the perpetuation of economic problems. By analyzing the interconnection of these factors, it becomes clearer how Argentina, once an economic giant, has plunged into a long period of instability and decline. Understanding these historical processes is essential to avoid repeating the same mistakes in other countries. The history of Argentina offers a valuable case study for understanding the rise and fall of economic powers. By comparing it with other nations that have faced decline, we can identify patterns and draw important lessons. The British Empire, which dominated the global scene for centuries, began to decline after the Second World War. Several factors contributed to this decline: the high cost of war, the loss of its colonies, the emergence of new powers such as the United States and the Soviet Union, the inability to adapt to new technologies and international competition. Similarly, Argentina, after a period of great prosperity, was unable to adapt to changes in the global economic scenario, remaining dependent on an outdated economic model. The 2001 crisis, in particular, exposed the fragility of the Argentine economy in the face of global market movements. Oil-rich Venezuela also faced a serious economic crisis, despite its abundance of natural resources. Excessive dependence on oil, mismanagement of resources, corruption, and populist policies led the country to economic and social collapse. Argentina, although dependent on agribusiness, has diversified its economy somewhat more than Venezuela, but the lack of robust diversification has made it vulnerable to external shocks, such as falling commodity prices. The fragility of foreign exchange reserves, common to both countries, has also exacerbated crises. The lesson here is that an abundance of natural resources alone does not guarantee economic success. Efficient management, economic diversification, and responsible public policies are essential. The Soviet Union, an economic and military superpower, collapsed due to a combination of factors: an inefficient planned economy, a rigid bureaucratic structure, excessive military spending, a lack of technological innovation, and internal and external political pressures. Argentina, although not a communist system, also suffered from a heavy bureaucracy, excessive state intervention in the economy, and a lack of adaptation to changes in the global market. The main lesson is the importance of flexibility, innovation, and economic openness for long-term success. After World War II, war-torn Germany and Japan managed to rebuild themselves and become economic powerhouses. The key to their success was the implementation of deep structural reforms, investment in education and technology, openness to international trade, and a strong culture of work and discipline. Argentina, on the other hand, struggled to implement consistent reforms and adapt to new economic realities. The lesson here is that adaptability, long-term vision, and the implementation of reforms are crucial to overcoming crises and achieving sustainable development. Argentina's history offers valuable lessons for emerging countries seeking sustainable economic growth. Over-reliance on a single sector, such as agribusiness in Argentina's case, makes the economy vulnerable to external shocks. Diversifying the economy by developing other sectors, such as industry, technology, and services, is essential to ensuring stability and long-term growth. The example of Germany, with its strong industry and focus on innovation, demonstrates the importance of diversification. The search for immediate solutions and the lack of strategic planning undermine sustainable development. Deep institutional reforms that promote state efficiency, transparency, and fiscal responsibility are essential. The experience of Asian countries, such as South Korea and Singapore, which have invested in education, technology, and infrastructure, demonstrates the importance of a long-term vision. Corruption and poor management of institutions undermine public and investor confidence, hampering economic growth. The creation of independent and transparent institutions, the fight against corruption, and the promotion of a culture of public accountability are fundamental to sustainable development. The world is constantly changing with new technologies, new markets, and new challenges. Countries need to be resilient and adapt to change in order to remain competitive. Investment in innovation, technology, quality education, and infrastructure is crucial to ensuring adaptability. Excessive debt and uncontrolled inflation are factors that destabilize the economy and harm growth. A responsible fiscal policy, with control over public spending and currency issuance, is essential to maintain economic stability. Investing in quality education is crucial to the development of qualified human capital, capable of driving innovation, productivity, and economic growth. The bottom line is that long-term economic success requires a combination of responsible public policies, strong institutions, economic diversification, investment in education, and the ability to adapt to global changes. Argentina's history serves as a warning and a source of learning for other countries.